We're recording.
I will entertain a motion that we enter back into open session.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we enter back into an open session.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor and coming out of executive session, please raise your right hand. Motion carries. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion that we accept student transfer summary of recommendation for admittance 2021-2022 and summary recommendation for release 2021-2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to accept the recommendations for student transfers and releases. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Motion carries.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we accept recommendation for staff separation for the 2021-22 school year.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded for the recommendations for professional staff separation. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Motion carries.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we accept the recommendation for professional staff employment for year 21-22.
Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded to accept the recommendations for professional staff employment. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Motion carries.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we accept the recommendation for administrative staff, a recommendation Mrs. Michelle Robinson, the position of assistant principal at Cottesville Elementary School.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to accept the recommendation for administrative staff, Mrs. Michelle Robinson, assistant principal at Cottesville Elementary. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Motion carries.
Madam Chair, at this time I'd like to make a motion that we suspend the second reading requirement to adopt a policy for the adoption of our temporary ADD policy for protective face coverings.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to suspend the second two readings for the temporary policy ADD. Is there any discussion?
May I clarify, that motion is to suspend in order to adopt the amended ADD, is that correct?
It is, yes sir, thank you.
Thank you. To suspend the current as well as adopt the new policy ADD face coverings.
No, ma'am. Suspend the two reading requirement and adopt the revised policy ADD.
I'll just repeat the motion.
Please, thank you.
Restate it.
Thank you.
I make a motion to suspend the second reading requirement and adopt policy ADD as revised as of this date, which is August 10th, 2021, for the to accept the new ADD revised policy for protective face cover.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right
Madam Chair,
hand.
before we
We do have discussion.
before we do a vote on the motion, I would ask that we yield to our attorney to cover some of the details in the amendation of the ADD policy.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to clarify, this motion is to adopt the temporary policy as revised today. The temporary policy that's been presented to you, first, it retains the voluntary use of face coverings by students, staff, and visitors in district education facilities that was already in existence. That policy is voluntary. The school district will not require, in compliance with the current state proviso, the school district will not require face coverings to be worn in the educational facilities, but does make that opportunity voluntary. The amendment, however, does require that face coverings be worn on district transportation which is new, and the amendment does require that face coverings be worn by student, staff, visitors in healthcare areas of school facilities as set forth in the policy. I did want to read, Madam Chair, if I could, the basis for the changes to the policy, the references, which are, in other words, this policy is based on the following. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention guidance for, right, those are examples of healthcare facilities include the healthcare facility rooms in schools, as well as athletic training facilities where healthcare is going on. So the references include the Center for Disease Control and Prevention guidance for COVID-19 prevention in K-12 schools. Both guidances dated July 9, 2021, and the recent one, July 27, 2021. Also, the CDC order dated January 29, 2021, that requires persons to wear masks while on transportation conveyances. Also, the Center for Disease Control CDC update dated June 10, 2021, which confirms that passengers and drivers on school buses must wear masks pursuant to the January 29 order from the CDC. Also, the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, DHEC, COVID-19 interim guidance for K-12 school operations, which is the recent one dated July 29, 2021, which recommends school districts comply with the CDC order requiring that masks be worn on school buses and in healthcare areas. As a reference, for this policy is also the South Carolina Department of Education email to all districts dated July 29, 2020, entitled, quote, clarification of provisos, which states from the South Carolina Department of Education, quote, while the state will not be enforcing a face mask requirement on school buses, individual districts may choose to do so. Proviso 1.108 only covers educational facilities and does not extend to school buses, end quote. And, quote, face coverings may be required by students, staff, and visitors in healthcare areas of school facilities, end quote. And lastly, Proviso 1.108, which was adopted by the South Carolina General Assembly in the 2021-2022 Appropriations Bill, which prohibits school districts from using any funds appropriated or authorized pursuant to the Act to require that its students and/or employees wear a face mask at any of its education facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. And I would like to apologize for my confusion on the suspension of the previously adopted policy and the adoption of the new face covering policy, which for emphasis is still encouraging protective face covering for all staff and students. The changes are for a mandate protective covering, a face covering for transportation, as well as healthcare facilities within school property. Any other discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to take a minute just to make sure that our parents understand, in layman's terms, exactly what we're doing. You know, even though we, by state law, cannot mandate masks, and as our attorney said, we can't use any funding to promote the wearing of masks. And just so happened, you know, I don't understand how our General Assembly could pass a bill with that type of proviso in it. But nevertheless, we still have the responsibility of protecting the health of our students first and staff members as well. I just want to make sure that parents understand that even though we cannot create a mandate, that does not take away your ability to allow your child to wear a mask if you choose to do so. This policy does not create a prohibition of masks. What it does is or what the state law did was create a prohibition of the board creating a policy to mandate masks. So parents, if you still want your children to wear masks, it's still up to you to make that decision, based on your family and your family's needs when you're sending your children to our school. Because the main thing we want you to do is send your child to school and make your child have a safe as a safe environment as you can for your children. So to end, I just want to make sure that parents understand this does not create a prohibition of wearing a mask. So if you want your child to wear a mask, your child can still wear a mask to school as well as on school buses. We just can't promote that.
Just for clarification, masks will be mandatory on school buses. It's only voluntary in the facilities, in the buildings.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Thank you, Mr. Rowland.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy, for that too.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of temporary policy ADD, protective face covering, please signify by raising your right hand. Motion carries. Thank you. I would also like to say that this new temporary policy will be on our website, and so if there's any clarification that's needed, we understand parents, this is a very confusing time, so please reference the website for any additional information, and the board will update you as best we can, and the district will as well. Any other business?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair, I want to just put on notice to put me on the agenda for our next board meeting. I went to a school safety conference I think it was last week, and it had some very pertinent information that I believe that the board should hear, even relative to what we talked about tonight with student transfers and so forth. So if you put me on the agenda, you can put me under your section, that'll be fine.
Okay.
And I'll give the board a briefing on some of the information that I received at that conference.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Hearing no other business, is there a
Madam
motion to
Chair.
adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Bernie. You can draw a picture.